Dude, never did it.
Welcome back to Never Did It. I am Jake Ziegler, and I'm here with Brad Garoon. We are going to be talking about movies that we, before this podcast, never did. We have never seen them, and now we have seen them, and we'd like to talk about them. The year is 1943, and the first movie is actually one that neither of us has seen. It was chosen by Brad, and it's called The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Brad, tell us why you chose this movie.
I don't think I had a single movie before this podcast. I don't think I had seen a single movie from 1943, and this was highly regarded. It was high up on the list of Letterboxd movies that people like. I was very nervous to give it to you because I didn't want to watch a 3-hour movie from 1943, and I ended up freaking loving it. So that worked out really well. It's about a British soldier. The movie starts with a bunch of young British soldiers near the end of World War II, or maybe in the middle of World War II, doing a War Games campaign. They're in England. And it took me a while to understand what was happening. Sort of like a practice scrimmage type deal. The old soldiers against the young soldiers. And the young soldiers have decided that they're going to start the game before the game is actually meant to commence at midnight that night. And they're going to go to a bathhouse where all the old soldiers are bathing, and they're going to kidnap, or they're going to capture the leader of the old soldiers. And they do, and then he freaks out. He's like, we're not supposed to start until midnight again.
Midnight.
And he basically looks like the Monopoly Man without a monocle.
Yeah.
Although I don't think the Monopoly Man has a monocle. I think that's a trivia thing that comes up a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a Mandela effect.
Yeah, Mandela effect type deal. Amandala.
Mandela, yeah, Amandala Lorian.
He looks like he's fat, he's bald, he's got a big mustache, and he talks like a bird. And he beats this guy up in a swimming pool. And then we flash back to that guy's life. He screams like, "You don't know what I've been through. You don't know why we have decorum with our enemy and why we follow these rules and da-da-da." And then the movie is progressing through his life. He's a young but really well-known soldier during the Second Boer War between the UK and factions in South Africa. I learned a lot about the Boer War because I was curious after watching this movie. American history doesn't teach you much about it, the American public school system. So he goes to Germany to defend before there's a war with Germany, but because the Germans are sympathetic to the Boers, he goes there to defend the UK's honor against a German journalist. And then while he's there, he insults Germany to an extent enough that he has to do a duel with a German soldier. And then the rest of the movie is pretty much about his relationship, one, with this German soldier over the years, who they cut each other up and then they convalesce together in the hospital. So it's about their relationship throughout the years. They become friends, and about his relationship with 3 women who all look very similar. One being the woman who asked him to come to Germany to confront the journalist. One being she was a nurse during the war at a convent, and then she becomes his wife. And then one being his driver in his old age. And I just thought it was incredible. I love it. But before we get into why I loved it, why don't you tell us a bit about your feelings about The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp?
Well, my feelings at first, or again, I was not looking forward to this because for as well regarded as I know it is now, I was not familiar with the title at all. And it's a little embarrassing to say that because, yeah, I try not to look up too much about the movies we watch that I haven't seen before I watch them, because I don't want to be influenced by anything that I read. I just want to watch it, especially one like this that I don't know anything about. But I wasn't familiar with it. And so it's kind of like, oh, God, another war movie. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes. I don't know anything about this. It wasn't like an Oscar movie, so it doesn't. I like checking things off lists, so like it's not going to check anything off a list for me or anything. So I honestly was not looking forward to it. Then I ended up really, really liking it a lot, almost loving it. I think I loved it. It's excellent. That the main performance is so good, and the 3 women that you refer to again was all they look similar because they're all played by Deborah Kerr. She's fantastic in all 3 of them. The man who plays the German soldier is great. It's just it's a really terrific movie, and it's different than what a lot of war movies were like at that time. A lot of the war movies, at the time were focused, really focused on the battle aspect of it, like the heroism of the battle and everything. And this was really a smaller scale war movie, like you said, centrally about just the relationship between these 2 soldiers from opposite sides. And I thought that was a really interesting way to view the war, especially since it was made as World War II was happening. It's not even looking back on the war. It was like being filmed in the midst of it, which I think is kind of incredible.
It's funny. This was made not just during the war, but in response to how Churchill was handling the war. Churchill regarded Roger Livesey's, it's really hard to say that name.
Yeah.
It might be Livesey, but regardless, Major General Clive Wynne Candy, he regarded that as a shot at him, a shot at Churchill, and wanted the movie banned. It was very much like the William Randolph Hearst wanted Citizen Kane banned because he thought it was about him. And the movie was made because, in general, there was a big contingent of the British who felt that the British were treating this like a regular war, and the Nazis were not treating this like a regular war. And that came after World War I, where they felt the British were treated World War I. And this comes up in the movie a lot. The British are fighting a regular war the way that you're supposed to fight a war, while the Germans are using chemical weapons and Cyclone B and I guess that was the Nazis, but mustard gas and things that were against the rules of war, which, things that eventually became the Geneva Conventions. Mm-hmm. And Candy represents that old way of doing things. And the movie slowly because it's a long movie, but gets into how his way of doing things is probably not right. And at the end, he does come to respect the way that young people want to fight this war and understands that he's out of touch. But he does that because the reason he felt so strongly that you had to fight a morally acceptable war is because he had this relationship with this German soldier. He became friends with him after their duel. He captured his regiment during World War I. And then saw him in a German prison camp. The German fella didn't want to be his friend anymore, but they reconciled anyway. And there was all this interesting conversation going on between the British elite and this German soldier about what rebuilding Germany would look like after World War I. And as we know from history, it didn't really get rebuilt after World War I, which is a big reason why World War II happened. There was massive poverty swept all throughout Germany, lots of scapegoating going on, and you got the Holocaust because of that, and you got war in Europe because of that.
That all plays into Oppenheimer, which we discussed a couple weeks ago.
There you go. A couple of weeks, like 2 months ago now.
2 months. Oh, right.
Yeah. So we record these things pretty close together.
Right.
Yeah, I just thought it was brilliant. Livesey is incredible. It's a little bit of a stuffed shirt performance, and it's a little bit comical, but it's meant to be. The guy who plays the German soldier, Adolf Wohlbrook, is great. Interesting story about him, and something I found very fascinating about this movie and a lot of old movies. So this actor was half Jewish and gay, and the best monologue in the movie, it's the beginning of the third act. He comes in as an old man, and he's trying to emigrate to the UK. They don't want him to because they don't trust that he's not a German spy. And he talks very openly and honestly about how he lost his relationship with his children who became Nazis. He stayed in Germany as long as he could, but longer than he should have. He's not Jewish in the movie, but you get the sense that the actor is bringing a lot of his own experience to this monologue, and it really hit. I thought it was incredible. And it's interesting that because, one, it's a British movie, so it didn't get released in the United States when it got released in the UK, although we're breaking our own rule and doing it the year they got it released in the UK.
We're flexible. Yeah. The older movies, we're a little more flexible on.
Right. It didn't get any Oscar love. It wasn't that well regarded at first. It's become loved as time's gone on. It's so funny how movies work that way. And it's a beautiful movie. It's all on sound stages and all of the sets look amazing. Even the brief, you mentioned it's not really a war movie, but the brief scenes that are on the battlefield look crazy. They look like Kansas in Wizard of Oz.
Well, it's the Technicolor because it was filmed in the Technicolor, and it looks amazing. I mean, we watched it on Max. I think it was on Max. And yeah, the Technicolor thing, it looks better than, like, sometimes now when I watch movies from the 80s, like recently, we just did Wall Street and Tampopo, and those look like they really look like they're from the 80s. But Colonel Blimp, like with this Technicolor, and they must have like restored it, looks amazing. Like the colors are, it's really vibrant. It's really visually stunning.
I wish I had said this last week, but Tampopo, one of the things I love about it is that it is so fully an 80s movie. The music, and it's Japanese, so you wouldn't think that it would necessarily have the same vibe as an American 80s movie. It absolutely does. The acting is like 80s style slapstick comedy. The coloring, like you said, looks just like an 80s movie. The music is very much like an 80s comedy soundtrack. Loved it. And this, like you said, it is a Technicolor beauty. Tell me what else you liked about it.
The performance, that main performance. This one took me again, again back to Tampopo, where it took me a minute to get used to. It took me a minute to warm to his performance because it is that first scene in the bathhouse, it is very slapsticky and very kind of jokey. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but it didn't quite set the tone. It didn't quite give me a sense of what the movie was going to be like right away. So it's like, okay, this is a little bit silly. First, he's got the big mustache and the, war starts at midnight sort of thing.
If I can interrupt for a second, I think they had a major challenge there too, because so the actor is playing this character over many, many decades. And in the first scene, he's bald and fat, but the actor's not fat, and he's naked in the opening scene. So they had to do a lot of creative framing to only show his face for that first bit where he's screaming about the war starts at midnight. So it feels weird that we're only seeing his face until you see them fight in the bathtub, and you only see the back of him because that's not the same actor, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it felt a little weird because the staging had to be such that they couldn't show the actor really.
I also think it just, once I got through the movie, saw the progression of it and how it went, I was glad that it kind of started that way, because you see exactly why he got to be that way, and it made so much sense that was the way he was, and that's why he was reacting the way he was, and he wasn't silly or over the top. Like the reason he grew his mustache, to hide that scar that he had and everything, there was really interesting reasons that he was this way, and they kind of play it off as really slapsticky in the beginning, but there's a lot more to it than that, and you just have to be a little patient to get into this movie, but if you are, it's really rewarding. It's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, that for sure, that ending is fully mirrors that opening, but I think it becomes rewarding quite early on. So a couple little things. I couldn't get out of my head that Livesey looks a lot like Little Man Tate. I don't know if you've seen Little Man Tate, and no. I refuse to call him by the actor's name, but they look the same. I wonder if Little Man Tate might be a time traveler. Couldn't get it out of my head. Can we talk about the duel scene for a second?
Oh, yeah.
So there's this duel in the first act. It's the culmination of the first act. After Candy insults this, or he gets in a fight with a journalist, and then through doing that starts lobbing insults at Germany in general. And then the German army make their soldiers draw straws to see who's going to fight Candy in a duel. And there's tons of build up to this duel. It's great. They really ratchet up the tension. They say the rules in German and then in English over and over again, very slowly. And then they don't show the duel. And that drove me insane. I was so upset, but it was clear that, well, they cut each other up because you see the after.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, they're not going to show that kind of violence in a movie from 43, but I wish they had, because I was so amped up for it.
Yeah, they really did. Yeah, they hyped it up like a big UFC fight. And then, it's just kind of, but was that a choice, you think? Or was it just because they didn't want to show that kind of violence at that time?
I don't think it was I think if they could have, they would have shown more. I think if they had if stunt work was such that they could do it and make it look good, and if they weren't worried about it getting censored, I think, although it was a British movie, I don't know what censorship was like for the Brits during the war.
Me either. Yeah.
I think maybe British audiences would have liked watching a Nazi get cut up. Or not a Nazi. At that time, it's pre-Nazis, and this character never becomes a Nazi.
Right, yeah.
Although this movie was criticized a lot for being sympathetic to a German soldier, regardless of the fact that he wasn't a Nazi. People were pretty upset about that.
Yeah.
It's funny, this movie mentions, because the movie takes place over 40 years. It came out in 43. It starts in 1903, and it mentions 1983, because in the beginning he says, you think about what your life's going to be like in 40 years, and it mentions the year 1983. The movie was then re-released in 1983, and that's when a lot of the accolades for the movie started coming out. I caught one specific journalist's quote about the reevaluation of the movie I thought was really funny. His name's Anthony Lane, perhaps. He said this in 1995. "This may be the greatest English film ever made, not least because it looks closely at the incurable condition of being English," which I just thought was hilarious. And on that note, I also thought it was funny that this movie makes fun of British food. And it's great to know that British food has been bad for almost 100 years.
Yeah. Some things are just comforting.
Yeah. I usually don't like this framing device that the movie uses, where you start at the end and then work your way back. And it's usually done because you start at the most exciting moment and then work your way back. But that's not really what happened here. What happened here is it starts at end of this guy's life where he has come to a decision, and then shows you why he made that decision, and also convinces him that decision or that worldview is not necessarily correct. It's just perfect. I gave it 4.5 stars, and I think it might be a 5-star movie.
I have the same feeling, and I've gone even lower. When I first got done watching, I was like, okay, that's 4 stars. And then I think I didn't rate it on Letterboxd, I think, until the next morning or something. And I was like, okay, by that point I had gone to 4.5. Now that we've been talking about it, this might be a perfect movie. Yeah. It's really great. Really wonderful. Do you want to talk about a less wonderful movie? We could talk about a less wonderful movie. Okay, so you gave me Saludos, Amigos. Oh, boy. Can you tell me why? Yes, and it was literally because that was the only movie that I had seen from 1943 that you had not seen at the time. Well, that means it must have meant that it was the only movie you'd seen from 1943, because I had not seen any movies from 1943. Yeah, sorry about that. That's okay. So let's talk about it a little bit. So this is not really a movie. Like The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, this movie came out during World War II, and it's a Disney animated film, sort of. It is technically part of the Disney animated canon, it's a Disney Animation Studios film, but it's really an ad for South America, right? It's a tourism video for South America. A lot of the movie is not animated. It's just live footage of stuff happening in South America. And that happened because a lot of animators
at that time were drafted into the war, and also because the Disney animation just didn't have the budget that it has now. I don't have a ton to say about this movie. Do you?
Not really. No, like I said, it's hardly a movie. I mean, I guess it's fine for this. It's not like it's bad or anything, or it's like it's not really an animated movie. I don't understand why they even count it in the canon. Like I feel like, and I'm really OCD nerdy about stuff like this. I would have a separate category for stuff like this. Like I wouldn't like, how can you count this in with like Aladdin and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and all these? Like how can you even? It's not even the same category. Like
there's a sequel to this movie called The Three Caballeros, which is more of an It's also got a lot of live action, but it's more of an animated movie than this movie.
For sure.
Since we both don't have much to say about it, and I actually think it is bad, and it's only 42 minutes long, which is bizarre, I would like to take this opportunity to talk, because I have now finished my watch of the entire Disney animated canon. Mm-hmm. And if I may, I'll just talk about that, if that's cool. I wanted an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I can work with that. Because I don't think we have any other Disney movies on our list.
Right. We already did Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which was an animated movie, and will come up in this discussion briefly. But yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah, good time to talk about it then.
All right. So let's start at the bottom. There are 6. We'll get through this pretty quick. But there are 61 movies that have been released by Disney Animation Studios, official Disney canon. Starting with Home on the Range, which is the less said about this movie, the better. This is the worst Disney movie ever released. It stars Roseanne. It didn't feel like anyone knew what the hell was going on when they were making this movie. Characters are talking, but it doesn't feel like they're talking to each other. And Judi Dench's participation in it did not help it be good. Do you remember anything about Home on the Range?
I remember I saw it at the theater when it came out. I think I reviewed it maybe for the newspaper. I remember, it was terrible, super unmemorable. Yeah, not good.
I mentioned last week that I got caught up on a trivia question about Over the Top, because I couldn't remember that I never knew really that Kenny Loggins had done a song on that soundtrack, or done most of the soundtrack, despite the fact that I'd recently seen that movie. This was also a trivia question that tripped me up a year ago, because it was just like, what Disney movie came out in 2004 about a farm? And I was like, none. There's no movie like that. So that's bad. All right. Number 60 is The Black Cauldron. This was an interesting one because it came out during a changing of the guard in Disney Animation Studios. It was the first time in a while that they had done a movie that had human characters, or that was starred human characters, featured human characters, because for a long time, the animators did not feel comfortable that they could draw realistic looking enough human characters. So most of the 70s and early 80s didn't have them. And it didn't work out. It's an interesting one because it has that Don Bluth style animation. If you've seen like All Dogs Go to Heaven, or The Secret of Nim, or Rockadoodle, or I don't know, like Don Bluth movie, the Penguin and the Pea, or whatever the hell it's called. He has an interesting animation style, but this movie is just deathly dull, really boring. The only thing this movie has going for it is that John Huston narrated the first few minutes, and that guy's voice is gold.
Amazing. Yeah.
Do you remember this movie at all?
I'm not sure if I have. I don't remember it. No, not at all.
So then next I have Saludos Amigos right there at the bottom. And right after that, I have Chicken Little, which is just another one that I think is duty and was early on in Disney's. It was one of their first computer animated films, and they did not have it down yet. It's very ugly and boring and bad.
Yeah. And Zach Braff is just a no-go for me.
Fair enough. Okay. So next we have our first, what I know is going to be a disagreement because we've talked about this recently. I have Ralph Breaks the Internet at number 57. I just did not think there was any reason for this movie to exist.
Oh, I remember liking it. I took my kid to it. Honestly, I don't think I've watched it since it came out. That was like 5 years ago. But I remember thinking it was a solid follow-up to a better, the far superior original.
I just thought that the original said everything that needed to be said about video games and being your true self. This didn't do it for me. Next is The Three Caballeros, which is the sequel to Saludos Amigos. Yeah, just not great. In fact, The Three Caballeros at least introduced an interesting character.
Oh, yeah.
Jose Carioca, I think his name was. Jose. Kind of surprised that Jose the Parrot didn't last in Disney animation more. He's been in a few cartoons, but not a lot. And then next is Melody Time, which was another one of those World War II era compilation movies. It was like Johnny Appleseed, which is weirdly very Christian, like overt Christian iconography throughout the movie, talking about doing the apple seeds for God. Very strange.
Oh, World War II was that one.
Yeah. And then next is Peter Pan, which is just horribly racist and more boring than I remembered it being.
Yeah.
And then Meet the Robinsons, which is another, just like the animation, it looks like Jimmy Neutron. I talked to your wife about this when you guys came to town for my wedding. I was like, you like Meet the, because you told me she liked it.
She does, yeah.
And then I asked her, I'm like, but it looks like Jimmy Neutron. She goes, yeah, I like Jimmy Neutron.
Yeah.
But it just looks cheap and kind of bad to me.
Yeah.
So the next four I'm going to go through quickly because I don't have a ton to say about them. But The Rescuers, which was one of those 1977 movies they made because they weren't great at doing human characters. So they did mice and birds, and it starred Bob Newhart and Ava Gabor. It was sort of like early on doing those celebrity voices, but Bob Newhart and Ava Gabor are not and have never been big stars. So, and then next up, and then next is Make My Music, another one of those compilation movies. Maybe you've seen the Singing Whale skit, but I'm sure not. It's not even on Disney Plus. So,
oh, gross.
There's a chance you haven't seen it. The Fox and the Hound. I was just surprised by how bored I was watching this because I remembered really liking it as a kid, and some people on my Letterboxd have given it 5 stars. But have you seen it?
Not in a very long time.
Yeah, you don't have it marked on Letterboxd. And then next, this one I probably do have to talk about a little bit. So Dinosaur.
Yeah, which I've seen fairly recently, actually.
So this movie's not great. It's not abysmal, but it looks not great. And the reason it looks not great is this movie was pretty much made as a way for Disney animators to get acquainted with computer animation, like to learn how to do it, to exercise, to show what they could do, and to push the medium forward. But it's real early days type stuff, and it looks real bad.
Yeah, and the story isn't interesting in any way or anything either. There's not a whole lot going on there.
I mean, there's a meteor strike at the beginning of the movie, which I was like, oh my God, are they going to kill all the characters right away? Yeah. No. Turns out it was a different meteor.
Yeah.
But
not that meteor.
Not that meteor.
Yeah.
Not that Holocaust. Different Holocaust. But not good. Don't recommend. Unless you're really interested in the history of animation, in which case it's the beginning.
Yeah.
We already talked about The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, but right here is where it landed on my list at number 48. And then right behind that, I think we're going to disagree again because I have Tarzan here, mostly because I watched this and couldn't remember any of it a week later.
Yeah, no, I love Tarzan. I think Tarzan's great.
I won't ask you to say more. Oh, we'll just talk a little bit about, I know you like the soundtrack. Tell me a bit about what you like about the soundtrack.
Oh, I love Phil Collins. I'm just an unabashed, unapologetic Phil Collins fan. I love the songs in it. My kid was really into when she was a baby. The You'll Be in My Heart was, a song that we sang to her, sing her to sleep, when she was little. And yeah, it's a personal attachment as well as I just really, I really enjoy the movie. I think it's good.
Fair enough. And then the next one we also disagree on. You gave Fantasia 5 stars, and so did a lot of people. And I think it's pretty boring. I give it 3 stars for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really cool, especially different for what they were doing at the time. I like the episodic nature of it, and I think it's kind of classic.
I might have just like cell phone brain, but I liked Fantasia 2000 more than Fantasia.
I don't think I've seen that one all the way through.
Oh, it's worth checking out. There's some really cool stuff on it. There's one. So I have Fantasia 2000 at number 30 on the list. And that's right smack in the middle. I gave it 3.5 stars. There's a really great skit, Rhapsody in Blue, and it's based on New Yorker cartoons. It's incredible. But after Fantasia, I have like a 1-2 punch of Pocahontas and then Hercules, which came out around the same time. And both I was just like, yeah, these are fun. But even now, I don't remember, like the songs aren't. Pocahontas has more memorable songs than Hercules. I can remember 1 song from Hercules and I think 2 from Pocahontas. Both, like, I don't know, Mel Gibson just did not sound like he was interested in being in that movie. He sounded really bored.
Yeah. Christian Bale, though.
Yeah, for like 5 seconds. And his character is such a doofus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then same thing. You got another right wing weirdo in Hercules with James, what's his name? James Woods. And James Woods is at least sounds like he's into it. Like really.
Right. Yeah.
He's probably the best part of that movie, frankly.
Yeah. He's giving it his all.
But I just don't find it that interesting. In fact, all my memories of Hercules come from the video game Kingdom Hearts. They don't come from the movie. There was a part where I was like, where is the scene? And it wasn't. It's something I remembered from the video game. So that was weird. And the next is a pretty new one, almost the newest one, but Strange World.
Strange World's okay.
Yeah, it's like fine. One thing I noticed in Strange World, there are these TikTok videos of mostly women who do impressions of what animated characters look like. And it's like the exaggerated facial movements, like the bounce and squish, which is a very big animation technique to make things look like they're moving. But a lot of Disney movies will do them in people's faces to show expressions. And then in this movie, the son character, his bounce and squish of his face is so much that I found it very, very, very distracting. But the movie's fine.
Yeah.
Jake Gyllenhaal can do nothing bad. Only meh. Next up is the Aristocats, which is a little bit better than I remembered, but has one of the most racist scenes in Disney history. And that's really saying something when a cat plays the piano with chopsticks and says some stuff that should not be said in film.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty wild. And then next I have Mulan, which I have the same issue with Mulan as I have with, I skipped a bunch. I just skipped a whole bunch.
Oh, did you?
I'll just real quick go back and say the ones that I skipped. The Sword and the Stone. I loved it as a kid. It did not hold up. Unfortunately, it's really repetitive. Fun and Fancy Free. It's really two movies. It's Mickey and the Beanstalk and Bongo, which was supposed to be the sequel to Dumbo, but then they just made it a short film instead. And they're fine, but nothing special. Mickey and the Beanstalk I have seared in my brain, but Winnie the Pooh, the new one, the new Winnie the Pooh, it's fine, but it's not as good as the first one that Disney put out in the series. It's interesting that the 2011 Winnie the Pooh is only 63 minutes. Yeah. And Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which are the two canonical Disney animated movies, the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh is like 3 short films. So it's weird that Winnie the Pooh has never gotten like a full length movie. And honestly, if you watch him, you kind of understand why. It's not that interesting of a character.
Justice for Pooh.
Okay. And then Brother Bear, which I think was kind of a miss. It was just another one where it's like, if you could tell me the plot of Brother Bear all the way through, I'd be very impressed.
Yeah. I think that's another one that's solid, but not a favorite.
Yeah, you have it. You mentioned it was nominated for Best Animated Feature. Most of these were.
A lot of them were. Yeah, anything from 2001 on, except for like Home on the Range or Chicken Little. Okay, so Mulan, I said same issues. And then next I have Jungle Book, which is good, but doesn't really get interesting till the end. It's pretty boring for the most part. And then at the end, although the songs are very memorable. Oh, yeah. So we're still in 3-star territory. Next up, I have The Great Mouse Detective. It's fine. I watched this like 2 months ago. Don't remember anything about it. I like it. Yeah. Radigan. It's a Sherlock Holmes story. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's one that's a bummer. I have it 3 stars. Big Hero 6, which I loved the first time I watched. Yeah. I watched it again a couple months ago and was like, there's not much here. I love Big Hero 6 as far as I remember. Yeah, watch it again. Or don't, actually. I would say don't watch it. Don't do that. Enjoy your memories of it. I wish I hadn't watched it again because I loved it the first time I saw it. I think also I have some comic book movie fatigue, and that's playing into it. That's real. Lilo and Stitch, another one like I think Kevin McDonald makes this movie. He's the funniest part of it. And then the rest of it's like, it's fine. Yeah. There's an alien. Yep. Whatever. I like it. Atlantis, The Lost Empire. Cool concept. Really cool concept for a movie. Michael J. Fox is the star. Gotta love it. Another one where like the story kind of goes off the rails at the end. Frozen 2. So let's see where we're at now. Frozen 2 at number 31. Then it goes in order. Frozen 2, Fantasia 2000, The Rescuers Down Under at number 28. Princess and the Frog, then Zootopia. I know you love it. I just don't think it's as good. We just watched it the other night, actually, with my mom, because she'd never seen it. I saw it and you gave it 5 stars. Yeah, love it. I'm in 3.5-star territory here. Raya, which I gave 4 stars the first time I watched it again, 3.5. Wreck-It Ralph, 3.5. It's pretty good. Mm-hmm. Treasure Planet, I think, is underrated. It's a very cool take on Treasure Island. Yep, I think so too. The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, Heffalumps and Woozles is a banger song that everyone should know. That skit is wild. Movie's solid. Lady and the Tramp, pretty good. Not as great as I remember. Bolt is fine. I probably have Bolt a little too high at 21. And then now we're into like stuff that's pretty good. Cinderella, number 20. It's good, but Cinderella doesn't do anything. Everyone does stuff for her. She does nothing. This movie could happen without her. Gosh, yeah, that's really true, isn't it? Yep. There was a guy who worked on it. I can't remember which, but one of the animators who worked on it ended up getting fired off the movie because he was like, can we have her do something? She doesn't do anything. Number 19 is Dumbo. Cute movie, but very short and doesn't amount to a ton. It could have been 30 minutes long, probably. I'm a white person, so caveat there. I don't think the Crow song is racist, but there might be something in it that I'm not seeing. Number 18, Bambi. Another good one, but a little boring. Tangled, solid, not spectacular. Beauty and the Beast. I know a lot of people are obsessed with this movie, love this movie. Guilty. Jake's holding his hand up. He's one of them. I think it's good, but I don't think it's great. I think of that era of like upper echelon Disney, it's the least good. And then Encanto, we just watched it. Encanto, kind of predictable. The songs are very good. Oh, yeah. But another one where these movies where they try to have a movie without a villain, I sometimes they don't work. Like Frozen 2, just throw a villain in there. Make it a little more interesting. Yeah. Oliver and Company, really fun movie. We've talked about this on the podcast before. Billy Joel kicking ass in his one film appearance ever. That Street Savoir Faire song is awesome. Yeah. Not much else to say about except that. And now into the 4-star movies. Number 13, Snow White. It was the first. It's still very good. Number 12, 101 Dalmatians. There's actually a lot of good tension in that movie. Yep, my dad's favorite. I totally understand why that might be the case. Yep. Number 11, Frozen. I see a lot of people slagging on this movie now because they don't think it looks good. I totally disagree. I think the water effects are incredible. I think the songs are memorable for a reason. Only one of them's even a little annoying. The most annoying thing about the song Let It Go is that they make fun of it in the movie Frozen 2. That's lame. That is lame. Yeah, because that song's a showstopper. I mean, it's great. Number 10, Aladdin, just terrific. Robin Williams, just great movie. Number 9 is a personal favorite for me, Robin Hood. I just always loved it. I love the folksy nature of it. I love that Peter Ustinov is in it. I love this movie a lot. Yeah, that was a big favorite of my brother and I and sister and I as a kid. So we watched it a lot. I love it still. Underrated, I think, as far as Disney movies go. Speaking of which, Hunchback of Notre Dame. Holy crap, this is a weird movie. Yeah, it's dark. Like it's crazy dark for a mid-90s Disney movie.
Absolutely. The bad guy is mad because he's horny and doesn't like being horny.
Yeah.
That's weird.
That's real weird. I mean, because I saw that's one I didn't see at the time it came out, because mid-90s I was like a teenager, so it was just like kind of like, you know, Disney movies weren't really in my wheelhouse then, so I didn't see them until my kid was a little bit younger. So this is fairly recently, you know, within the last 5 to 10 years. And yeah, like so it was like Mulan, Hercules, Pocahontas were the ones I'd never seen. I'm like, yeah, these are all solid, you know, pretty okay. And as a Hunchback, it's like, wow, this is something entirely different.
Yeah, Hunchback is very good.
Yeah.
Emperor's New Groove. That's just a bop. It's just a really fun movie. David
Super
Spade
fun.
at his absolute best. And then Eartha Kitt's doing a great job. John Goodman's fun. And of course, Patrick Warburton just killing it.
Absolutely.
Sleeping Beauty. Was surprised at how blown away I was by this. They changed up their animation style for this at the time. It was like late 50s, I want to say. Yeah, 1959. Looks like a Renaissance painting and very compelling story. And Merriweather is one of the best side characters in all of Disney film. Moana, this was one that I did not give enough credit the first time I watched it this time. And I was like, I would watch this on Broadway multiple times. The songs are amazing. It moves so well. People are like, The Rock's a bad singer. No, he's not. Now I say this, I would watch it on Broadway over and over. I do not need a live action version of this movie.
Yeah, I don't really understand why that's happening, other than maybe they just want to do it with The Rock before he's too old to do it.
Probably.
You know, or whatever. But yeah, I think the movie this is one that my kid was really attached to from early, so I've probably seen it like 100 times. And yeah, I still love it.
Love it. Number 4, Little Mermaid.
Yeah,
it's just terrific. Didn't need to be remade. Haven't seen the remake. You have,
it's
right?
Okay. Yeah, it's okay.
You know, it's not okay. The Lion King remake. You know, it is okay. The Lion King cartoon. That's number 3.
Excellent. So holds up really well.
Perfect. Number 2, Alice in Wonderland. Oh my God. This movie is so weird and I love it. The only reason it's not a 5-star movie, in fact, I've only given one Disney movie 5 stars, but the only reason it's not a 5-star movie is it does not have an ending. It just ends.
Yeah. That's
so
right.
That's a bit of a bummer. And then number 1 is Pinocchio, which is a perfect Disney movie.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely.
I don't have much more to say about that. I hope this episode didn't go long because we did a list of 60 movies instead of talking about Saludos Amigos, but you don't need to watch Saludos Amigos. That movie is
really
bad.
Don't.
But you do need to watch Pinocchio and Alice in Wonderland if you haven't seen them recently. And The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Sleeping Beauty. Those are like the...
And Moana, if you've somehow not seen it at this point.
Really, really good. All right, that's it for Never Did It this week. We'll be back next week with 1933.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to know what is coming out next week, go to our Letterboxd profile. You can find me at Brad Garoon on Letterboxd. I think Jake, you're Jake Ziegler on Letterboxd.
Yep, it's Jake_Ziegler.
And both of us have pinned to our profiles our Never Did It podcast list. You could also just search for the Never Did It podcast list. And the 2 movies that will be discussed on next week's episode are always at the top of that list. So check that out. And thank you for joining us for Never Did It.